So, in terms of what transpired in the cannabis space, what do you see as the trajectory of the demands and the different use of psychedelics?
Yeah, so unlike cannabis, where there's recreational use, I do not see recreational psychedelic use ever being legalized. I think that in the context of the way we want people to benefit from it, utilizing them in a more process driven setting, I think is essential to people getting the most out of it versus just going into the woods with your friends and eating a couple grams. One of the other things that I think we should be very careful about is everyone was so excited about the green rush, about making money, that when we looked at all the legislation and all the things that were being written, we had an idea that only those that had like 8-figure or 9-figure backing would be the winners of the cannabis space. But we didn't care. We just said, F it. At least people aren't going to jail. And now we're seeing the cannabis industry starting to organize just like every other industry, which is there's going to be 4 or 5 main players, and all the really great boutique shops that were run by passion driven, compassion driven entrepreneurs no longer exist. They all work for the big 5, the big 6. And we're starting to see the products become more generic. And I don't want to see that happen in the psychedelic realm. I don't want to see only those that could raise the most money become the people that have the brands that people recognize. I want to see the people that have been doing like the work with maps all this time, the people that have been helping Johns Hopkins University for the last 15, 20 years. I want to see these people at the top. I don't want to see the professional fundraisers dominate the industry like they've done in the cannabis industry. And I'm not afraid to say that. I mean, the people listening, if you're getting bothered by it, like I'm talking about you guys. You guys are the problem in the cannabis industry. Why it's so much more expensive now that it's legal, that it's not affordable by your patients anymore. And if that happens in the psychedelic realm, that'll be like just the saddest thing, because just think about this. Cannabis is more accessible now, but it's more expensive. When it was illegal, it was cheaper. That makes absolutely zero sense. And this is what happens when greedy people get into businesses without the right intention. And with cannabis, even though it kills me, like I could live with that. But man, if this happens to the psychedelic space, that would really crush me, because I do feel like entheogens and psychedelics are the one thing that could really change people's minds and really open them up to different possibilities. But if that's controlled by people that don't want people to have these possibilities, then, that kind of makes me a little fearful.
But if you look at the natural cycle, we're now getting super heady. So just I want to get back to the hearts in a moment, but just humor my intellectual curiosity for a moment. But if you look at a natural business cycle, you have essentially the artisans, that people full of passion, mission, and core values because they believe in it. And then outside money, investment comes in, and then it's in consolidation. Right now you have bigger and bigger conglomerates because they have the gravitas of building infrastructure, hiring the right talent, having the right people, and all these other things. So then you can scale the kind of products and service and quote unquote impact that they want to make. So in my mind, naturally, this is the business cycle that happens. And you could see that from my point of view in different industries all over. One may say, hey, this is making the business or the industry worse. But one may also say the long tail effect, right? So yes, there are some blockbusters that everyone knows. At the same time, you can find music, movie, books that has that long tail effect. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I think in a more kind of, balanced view, you're absolutely right. A lot of the laws that were passed, it more or less set it up so that if you were an artisan, you had no chance to succeed. So
the threshold to entry is way too high. You need tons of capital to get in, therefore is basically blocks everyone else from coming in. Okay.
Yeah. So basically what happened was the larger companies lowballed or introduced pricing that was never before seen in the industry, bled money, caused all the artisans to not be able to compete. And some of these larger guys bled themselves out too and could never
Oh,
recover from that
I
strategy.
I see.
Yeah.
So like
So
predatory pricing is what you're essentially what you're saying.
exactly. Predatory pricing, and they were the only ones that could do it because they had raised so much capital. And
Mm,
that was actually what people had predicted was like, hey, given Prop 64 and the way that it's written, only those that raise 8 or 9 figures will be able to play this game, and those that don't are going to have a really tough time. And on top of that, they brought in some techniques that work really good in other industries, which is, hey, if you could bring a price point that the others can't compete with, that's a great way to buy market share. And ultimately, they shot themselves in the foot because they couldn't run a sustainable business. So it ended up actually hurting the entire industry. I don't know if you looked at any of the papers, but the largest brands, the Men's, the Crescos, the Canopies of the world, like their earnings are all super down. And because they trained the public to be used to these prices, when they tried to bring the prices back up, there was a lot of pushback. And then on top of that, taxes are 30%, which is why the black market is now 6 times bigger than
mm,
it was prior to legalization.
that's interesting. Okay, so these are some of the things that what not to do when it comes to the development of psychedelics. But
Correct.
I didn't quite understand why the concern that people have of companies like Compass, but they raised a lot of venture capital and people are really critical of that. Now I see it because I can see the mirror side of in the cannabis industry.